nó giờ bây tụ mùa Pakou nữ của Pakou Xiong nó ta chỉ mà luôn bây thì hầm bò Xiong nó nè như ấy tụ tàu lò ba lúc công hậu hay thì do lúc công hậu mù ba trục họ tâm mừng nhớ rồi thì vật thắc cầm bầu giờ họ thì thay khơi mong cho toàn giả mấy lên đầu của cho nên một nữ ông cái lúa hay thì vì lý cha nên thì ní tiềnในอเมริกาแต่ชีเขามั่วinterest ในที่เราป้าไปมองเขาตั้งเหมือนเนาะแต่โรงเรียนตอนนี้ก็เลย it's nice to meet you here in Sheboygan Wisconsin and tell us a little bit about what motivate you to take a leadership on this Hmong grace issue in Thailand.
Well, as I mentioned, I grew up during the Vietnam era and would watch the footage of the Vietnam tragedy in the evening, and it always just haunted me as a youngster. And in the 70s, as a teenager, I became more socially aware, and I just couldn't understand how this cruelty could have been perpetrated against the Asians. Back in 2006, there was a young Hmong teenager who was shot and killed by suburban police. I was a member of the NAACP at the time, so they sent me to the meeting, the committee to support the Xiong family, and we heard this terrible story of how this young man who had been on a police tether but at home sleeping, the police stormed the house and he was shot and killed. No translators were present. He was sleeping, so a very controversial situation. I became more and more interested in the dynamics of this and how a people that had come to the aid of the United States under the request of the CIA during the Vietnam era, how they could have been driven so far underground and have their rights violated to such an extent in America, which is the country that they sacrificed for. So I began researching and entered my master's program in social justice at a college in Detroit, and became so determined to help speak for the Hmong issue and what the Hmong sacrifice was during Vietnam. And over the last 7 years, I've learned more and more of how secretive the CIA actions were, that they were in fact against the Geneva Conventions, so that finding information about an illegal covert war took a lot of digging. As I got to know more and more Hmong elders and heard their escape stories, it touched my heart to the point where I realized I could not write an academic paper. I needed to start filming their faces and their voices, and I've been archiving those films for about 4 years now. And what I thought would be a 6-month project, I have more and more people coming forward telling me their stories.
So it will be a long project and bigger project, right?
Yeah, and I've sort of equated this with Steven Spielberg's Shoah project. He has done this for Holocaust survivors, and I believe firmly at this point in time, grassroots Americans and all different cultures and ethnicities in this country are realizing that the way things are right now, it's not humane. And I find people wanting to know the truth of the 60s and 70s because that's our background. And the stories that the Hmong tell, and many were introduced to it through the Gran Torino movie, many of the stories the Hmong tell are bringing truth to Americans and helping Americans realize we have a responsibility when we vote to make sure that our leaders do not carry out military actions that then affect people like the Hmong for generations to come.
And one other thing is that what is your role in this organization?
Well, I was invited in January to be a consultant to the National Hmong Grave Desecration Committee, and the reason that I came on board is I've got a very diverse background working between law enforcement and very diverse ethnic groups, especially those forced refugees, as the Hmong have been since '75. So I've sort of learned how to kind of walk a fine line between the different ethnic communities and law enforcement and bring understanding to both sides. And I had especially some experience with that with the Hmong teenager who was shot and killed. I just found out recently that that young man was actually born in a Thai refugee camp. So when I understand the brutal environment he was raised in, it helps me convey to my American colleagues, just when you have a refugee situation, it changes a person's psyche. This young man acted in the only way he knew how, with violence. And we need to acknowledge the human story. I believe this is a human rights issue, and I believe firmly, as I mentioned, that America made a promise to the Hmong for their loyalty, and the Hmong have stepped up to that without exception. And we as Americans who are just coming to understand the story, we need to be there for the Hmong, because as we're there for the Hmong, we're there for ourselves, because no human being would want to see that happen to an ancestor.
And then